What's up, tubers? Tio here, Simplistic Fishing, coming back at you tonight. Talk to you a little bit about September fishing. You know, we're in a major transition month. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of people struggle in this month, and I'm hoping that I can give you guys a few tips to put you on some fish. Let's go. Let's start talking about September fishing. Now, I know you guys have probably seen a lot of stuff out there online about how September is one of the toughest months to fish. It's really hard to find them, blah, 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 blah. Well, the truth is September's really not that bad. The fish are still active. They're still feeding. Some of them may be lethargic a little bit, but overall, I mean, you're still going to be able to catch fish. I think the trick for me is finding the bigger fish. You know, I can find a lot of smaller fish in September, definitely, you know, to kind of keep the action going. But the tough part is finding those areas where those bigger fish are. And that's, of course, always the big challenge, but it seems like in September that becomes an even bigger challenge, at least for me in the area of lakes that I fish. So let's just start, you know, off about talking about September in general. So why is September a little bit of a tougher month? And I guess the first thing, you know, we need to look at is we need to take a step back and always look at the weather, right? The weather is so important to everything that goes on within fishing, the fish movements, where they're going, what they set up on, everything. And if you've been paying attention to the weather, if you're just not watching the actual statistics, but if you're just outside, you're thinking it's been 100 degrees for like 50 something days now. It's ridiculous. You know, the fish are going to be very lethargic, blah, blah, blah. The water's going to be really hot. You know, all the same things that you would think in your head naturally. But what you're not realizing is for the last 2 weeks, probably, maybe 2.5 weeks, I've been seeing it. The night temperatures, other than a few exceptions, there's been a few nights that have stayed up in the high 80s and even into the 90s, which is crazy. But other than that, there's been a lot of nights that have been dipping down into the 70s. And as soon as that starts to dip, those fish start to move. So that means they're already moving. It's still hot outside. Today is actually our first day where it's actually cooling down from 100 degrees down to 90 degrees or something like that, but where we can actually feel a difference. But that difference has already been happening. Those fish have already been moving. So where do those fish move to, and really why are they moving? I guess the first thing is, you guys have heard me talk about it a lot. You've probably watched a lot of other YouTube videos about it, but there's a thermocline that happens in the summertime, kind of going into late summer on a lot of the lakes. And most of the time you can see that thermocline on your graph. So if you start seeing the really, really fuzzy line down at the bottom and you're like, why is there a fuzzy line that's a lot different color from 15 feet down below, that's different than the 15 feet up top? Well, that's the thermocline. You can actually see it on your down scan and your 2D scan. So definitely something you want to look for. That thermocline, if you've never heard me talk about it before, you don't fish underneath it, period. If that thermocline is setting up at 15 feet, 15 feet is the deepest you want to fish. You don't want to fish any deeper than 15 foot. And the reason why is because that thermocline lacks oxygen. And without the oxygen, nothing can really live in that thermocline. So what that does is that pushes the fish up. So you'll hear a lot of people online, and you'll hear me say it too, you know, fish shallow. Shallow is what you need to do in September, but shallow can mean so many different things. You know, shallow can mean that you're fishing right on the bank line and you're just pounding bank lines. It could mean that shallow means that they're just higher in the water column than what you're used to, right? You're used to them being down on the bottom, and now maybe they've came up and they've suspended up a little bit higher off the bottom to get out of that thermocline. So there's a couple things that happen this time of year. One, you get a group of fish that a lot of times they're just going to be out in the open water just chasing bait, and they're 10 to 15 feet below the surface, if even that, sometimes 5 foot. You can get them on top waters. You can get them on very shallow diving type jerk baits and stuff like that. Those fish are kind of hard to catch. Unless you just want to stare at your screen all day and do live scope, you could definitely catch them that way. But other than that, they're pretty tough to catch. And so I don't really spend a lot of time on those because I'm not a huge one on live scope and looking at screens all day to catch fish. I want to go out and enjoy my environment, all that good stuff. So What I do is I focus on shallow water. And what I mean by that is basically water that's about 10 foot or less. So what I'll do is I'll get on a contour map and I'll set my highlights to 10 foot or less. So that pretty much breaks the lake down for me, tells me where I'm gonna put most of my focus on. So I know then that I'm only gonna focus on those highlighted areas. And then from there, what I'm gonna look for is I'm gonna be looking for flats. And flats is another one of those things where we talk about it a lot as fishermen. You'll hear about it a lot online, but no one really ever explains, I don't think, really explains what flats are, because flats can be a little bit confusing to people. And I think a lot of people, when I say go to the flats, a lot of people think that means go to the back of the coves. And that's not what I mean. Yes, that's shallow. And yes, there's a flat back there, but that's not the flats that I'm referring to. So when I'm looking for flats, I'm looking for main lake flats. So flats that are close to the main lake, that have the ability for the fish to pull off of at any time and get to deeper water. So if I was in the flat in the back of the cove as a fish, I can't pull out of there really quickly. I guess I could as a fish, but you got to imagine that's not a quick escape route for them, right? It takes them a while. They got to get out of the cove and get back to the deeper water. But if you find a flat that's out more off the side of the main lake, and then all of a sudden that flat goes from 5 to 10 feet down to 30 feet, well, that's a really easy escape route for them. They swim about 10 feet and now they're in a lot deeper water. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for, is main lake flats, 10 foot or less, preferably, 5 foot or less, really. I mean, when I think 10 foot or less, that's probably my dock rule. So when I'm looking for docks, I guess I'm getting all over the place here, but when I'm looking for the docks, it's 10 foot or less. When I'm looking for flats, really 5 foot or less. I'm talking super, super shallow in September. So stay shallow, but stay more main lake. So hopefully that makes sense. I've added in a few, graphics you guys have seen as me talking, kind of pointing out what these flats look like. If you're wondering what a flat is, basically it's just a huge area where the contour is basically the same. The depth stays the same. So if you can find an area on the lake where, you see it going down the bank line, all of a sudden it has this little jetty that comes out, it has a little thing that comes out, almost like a point. But really what it is, more just a big flat area that comes out. And it really is kind of, points and flats are kind of somewhat similar, because you'll have points with big flats on top of them. So it can be really confusing when we're talking about flats, but hopefully those images that I showed you, give you a real good understanding of flats. There was one on there that I showed, the Richland Chambers flat. That is probably the most noticeable flat, main lake flat that I know of in a lot of the lakes here in this area. So I went ahead and included that graphic. So that would be a really good one if you're trying to figure out what a flat is. Start there. That's an example of a giant flat. And then just know that a flat can be 15 to 20 feet wide, or a flat can be, 100 yards, 200 yards, 300 yards wide. You just never know, but look for those flat spots. Look for those spots that are 5 feet or less that have access to main lake water. And I think that's really going to help you guys out a lot. So we talk about flats. Now let's kind of talk about what we're looking for. So on the flats, there's really two things that I focus on in September and really kind of going into early October. And then things kind of start changing a little bit more. But in September, really looking for two things. So looking at those flats, right? Looking at flats 5 foot or less close to main lake water, and looking at docks that are 10 foot or less, and they're close or near to flats or deeper water. So basically, I like them if you can find them up on the flats. If you can find some docks that are up on a flat that are main lake, those are the ones that tend to produce a lot more for me right now. Not the ones in the backs of the coves, the ones more towards the main lake. They're closer. They can get out of those docks really quick and get to really, really deep water pretty quickly. Those are the kind of docks that you want to focus on. You also want to make sure that you have rock in the area. So docks, not so much. If you have docks and rocks, that's a bonus. But definitely if you're fishing the flats, you've got to have some kind of cover. And the cover I'm looking for 90% of the time is rocks. If I can find rocks on a flat, that's good to go. That's primo time, crankbait and all that good stuff, fun stuff, fun type fishing. If there's no rocks, so maybe you're on some lakes that don't have a lot of rock, then you're gonna look for those flats that have isolated cover, such as a laydown or something like that, that is gonna be more isolated into that particular flat. So you definitely want to take a look at that, but really focus on those rocks, focus on the isolated cover, and focus on shallow water, and it's definitely going to help you out. So next up, and I guess last thing we need to talk about really is what types of baits are we going to use. So the baits that I use on this are really pretty simple. There's really just three baits that I'm going to tie on the boat, and I'm going to go rock and roll with them. So first one is going to be the square bill. I love the square bills, the Berkely 3.5 square bill. Love that thing. I've got a link in the description for you guys. You'll also see a picture here of it. Perfect color for right now. 3.5 dives, I think 2 to 3 feet, something like that. Put it on a little bit lighter line, probably like a 7-foot medium, you know, something that's got a little bit of bend to it, and go to work. Work every single one of those dock pillars, work every piece of rock that you can see, work every piece of cover you can see, stay on those flats, stay on those docks, and just go to town with those square bills. And I'm telling you, you're going to catch some fish for sure, and you may come across some big ones as you do it. Next up, if I'm not cranking, my next thing is definitely going to be the jig. So the jig is going to be my next go-to bait. And for this one, I'm very particular on my colors, especially this year. I've had a lot of luck with the Berkely pitching jig. And I've got the colors on there. I can't remember the exact colors. I got some funky colors, but it's basically like purple and green. And then what I do is I pair that up with a Beaver trailer, Reactions Innovation Beaver trailer. And for whatever reason, that purple and that kind of greenish color just is magic right now. It's definitely one you want to check out. So again, I got those links in the description if you want to pick one of those up from Omnia Fishing. That will definitely help us out as well. And then last but not least, now, as I'm telling you all of this, remember, I'm going to have a square bill in my hand 90% of the time. So I'm just chucking the square bill all over the place. And it's not a slow retrieve or anything like that. It's basically throw it out and bring it back in, and I'm bouncing off of stuff, right? Bouncing off of stuff constantly. You know, just anything I can bounce off of, I'm going to do that. And then maybe every once in a while, you know, pause it and then start it again. But other than that, it's pretty much just a straight retrieve on that square bill. The jig, I'm going to only throw the jig around docks. I'm not going to throw the jig around flats and stuff like that. It's going to take me too long to cover that water. But docks, I can definitely cover some water flipping that jig around. And that jig is pretty simple. You know, you're going to take the jig, you're going to flip it into the docks around every single pillar that you can find on the dock. So every one of those posts, you're going to work. And it's really quick. It's really efficient. You can basically you're just going to pitch in there to the side of the post, let it fall down. Feel if you have any tension on it. Now, as it's falling down, you want to keep your line not really tight, because if you do that, you're going to affect the fall of it. But you want to kind of follow your line down with your rod, because a lot of time they're going to hit it on that original fall. And if you're just throwing it out there and you're not paying attention, you may miss it and they'll drop it before you can get your hook set. So kind of keep it not tight, because you want it to fall free fall, but I don't know, it's hard to explain, but just tight enough to where as you're going down, if they were to take just that little bit of slack out of there, you're going to feel it, and then you can set the hook. So on that jig, basically just flip into each one of those posts, let it fall to the bottom, pop it up twice. So dink, dink, right? Pop it up. You're going to feel it fall down again, and then you're going to feel it go thunk on the bottom. As soon as you feel that dunk on the bottom, let it sit there for about a half second or a second or so. If you don't feel any movement or see any movement in your line, reel in, do it again. And you're just going to repeat that process on every single pole. Now, if you're not getting bites on the jig, then there's one other bait that I'm going to throw in the September timeframe, other than the square bill and the jig, is going to be a shaky head. You guys know I love throwing a shaky head. That's like my go-to if I'm struggling or anything like that. In fact, it's like my kryptonite as well, because I will default to that shaky head 90% of the time when I should just keep a moving bait in my hand. So the shaky head is definitely a confidence bait for me. You're going to want to go with a 1/4 ounce and an 1/8 ounce. It depends. Sometimes they like the slower fall. Sometimes they like the faster fall. And then what you're going to do on that is you're going to put on a baby brush hog, a Zoom baby brush hog. I've got the specific colors in there for you as well. I think it's Watermelon Magic or something like that, that you want to take a look at. That's been one of our best colors. But you guys have heard me talk about this baby brush hog thing. I'm a firm believer in it, especially in September. It's got a lot of action on it, so it gets some reaction bites. But basically, you take that shaky head baby brush hog, you throw it out there, or you flip it into to a dock piling. And once it hits the bottom, so you feel it thunk on the bottom, you pop it up twice, just like that jig. So you pop it up and then you let it fall. And then you pop it up and you let it fall. Now if you're pitching the dock pillars and stuff like that, maybe just pick it up a couple times, let it flutter down. If you don't get it by it, reel in, do it again. If you're working across a big flat or you're out on a point or something like that, you can take that method and just use it all the way back to the boat. So throw it out there, let it hit the bottom, pop, pop. You'll feel it come up. You'll feel it wiggle its way back down, thump on the bottom, pop, pop, all the way back to the boat. Most of your bites will come after you pop it up, and when it's free falling back down, that's when they come in and they smack it. So it's important to figure out exactly how you want that tension in your line. You want to leave enough out there to where it free falls, but you don't want to leave so much that if they pull on it, that you don't feel it. And it's something that you're just going to have to get used to as you're out there on the water. So guys, I hope that helps you out a ton. Please go out to omniafishing.com. Check out what they've got. They've got great tackle selection. We've got the links to all of the baits that I talked about today, and all of the baits that we've been basically catching fish on for the last week or so. So get out there, catch us some fish. Don't be scared of September. It's still good times, and you can still catch a whole lot of fish. I hope this helps you, and until next time, I hope you catch your PB. Take it easy.